Hi, this is the latest episode of Trading Bitcoin with Tone Vase, and we're here with Tyler Jenks. I'm Leah Wald. So the news about the G20 dropped around 3 p.m. and after dropping so much Bitcoin, we jumped, right? We jumped back up and it's happening just in the last couple hours. It's very exciting. What are we at? 7:58, 2 minutes to go. So we're about to close the candle in the next two minutes. And it looks like we're going to make it potentially for one more week. So from hyperwave perspective, Tyler's going to come on. It's definitely touch and go, but we definitely have another week to live above the line. But Tone, what's the random number generator saying?
All right, so I just, this is really cool. So before everyone only had you on the big screen, now they have all of us. So this is awesome. And of course, you guys can see Tyler. He's right there with us. Go ahead and say hi, Tyler.
Hello, everybody. Great day. Very exciting. This is a terrific opportunity to talk about some very interesting details about what's going on.
All right, awesome. Yeah, well, also testing Zoom at the same time with 3 people. This is great. I'm actually going to enjoy this. All right, so the G20 news dropped. I mean, I've been busy all day with like client calls and all other stuff. I saw the price starting to bounce a little bit, but the G20 news dropped, and Tyler and I are going to talk about how news affects markets in general, especially the news of this type. But before we do that, let's take a look at the charts, and we take it from there. Let me do my screen share here. There we go. My typical disclaimer. Oh, actually, let me move this over. Where would it go? Let's put it here. My typical disclaimer for Learn Trading on my website. This is going to be real quick. I like the stuff in section 6, which is my favorite indicator. However, I also pay close attention to candlesticks and close attention to chart patterns like triangles. Check out the consulting, check out the trading seminars, my typical stuff. Tyler is going to take the lead here on the weekly charts. I will simply say, and there it is. There is the new candle. We went live. I went to screen share about 30 seconds before the new candle showed up. To me, this weekly candle is still weak, but Tyler's hyperwaves will tell you something different, or a different perspective, I should say. For me, this is not as weak as it would have been had we closed closer to the $7,600 area, but it's still pretty weak. Now, this also means that this week, for me, becomes most of this week coming up is going to be in no man's land. I will probably be going bearish if we make a new low. And unfortunately, that new low has to come $1,000 lower. But let's go straight to the daily, because I'll let Tyler talk about the weekly. As far as the daily is concerned, and Tyler is also going to talk about this, I had pretty much even before we got all the way to the bottom of 7,200, with a couple of hours to go, I did not expect us to rebound over $1,000 in the last few hours of weekly trades. Okay, so as a trader, if you do not anticipate this and you went short, the moment all of possible support got broken to the downside, you actually had plenty of chance to set a break-even stop loss because your position was up a pretty fair amount. If you didn't, your stop loss should have gotten hit. If you were short at any point on a move like this is where you have to be able to trade again. Okay? It's amazing how everyone comes out of the woodworks now that we bounced $1,500 in a span of about 4 hours. And these guys that I've never heard of before, and they all pretend like they actually knew it was going to happen. All right. This is the amazing part. I deal with these people all the time. So look, according to my random number generator, everything changes the moment you get a price flip. And you got this price flip actually near the top of this candle. So it took a while to get back up there. But right now, what you are looking at is a green 2 trading above a green 1, which means that there is a bullish trade on the table based on daily charts. Also, this end of day rebound held on a closing basis the support of 76, the upwards trend line, and it also like held this area. Because look, you see this red arrow going all the way down into the 6,000? If you watch me put this arrow on this morning, I purposely put the arrow on as of tomorrow. That wasn't by accident. I did it on purpose this morning, and I said as such, as of tomorrow, you have to wait for the close. Now, I understand that as a trader, you're impatient and you don't want to wait for the close. And to be honest with you, I usually anticipate the close, and sometimes, like right now, you would pay for it. But if you have the proper stop loss set, you survive to trade another day. But yes, everything going forward, this entire projection depended on a close below 7,600. When that didn't happen and this monster rebound took place, everything changes. And now we are in play for a potential rebound into the death cross. And if we can get above that, a potential rebound into the descending line. Those are your next 2 points of resistance. I don't really see that anything else there at this point. I'm not going to go to the higher level timeframes. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to hand it over to Tyler at this point. Maybe he can do screen share and talk about what this means for hyperwave on a higher level time scale. Then maybe we'll zoom in, and then we'll talk about how news affects technical analysis and technical traders. So I'm going to go off screen share. Oh, Tyler, you're somehow muted. Unfortunately. I don't know why that happens to your mic, even on here. Or is that me? Leah, can you say something? Oh, you are, Leah, so you're muted by choice.
I did mute myself, but I'm here.
You're muted by choice. Tyler is not muted by choice. So I'm not sure what's going on there.
Well, we got a screen share.
Right, but we can't hear him.
Tyler?
Does he know we can't hear him?
Let me message him. Tyler, we can't hear you.
Oh, now you're muted by choice, Tyler. Nope, still can't hear you. I don't know what happens to the mic. Maybe he gets disconnected?
It does happen.
Check your sound settings and then try to come back in. So we'll wait for that. I'm going to go back to screen share, and maybe I'll talk about the lower level timeframes while we wait on that. So let's zoom in. I'm actually going to jump to the 12-hour first. Here is the 12-hour. The 12-hour chart was also giving you all indications of a short trade. So right here on a 12-hour, once the red 2 started trading below a red 1, there was technically a short trade on the table. Wait, not where I was going. Basically a short trade on the table here as the red 2 started trading below the red 1. Now, the one thing that people have to keep in mind, and I always say it, whenever there is a one-off color flip in a move down, I am very skeptical that this is a legit price flip. So in this case, I would also be, and I probably should have mentioned this when I looked at the 12-hour chart earlier. I'm always skeptical of these one-offs.
Restarting your computer, sometimes that helps.
Oh,
Okay.
no. We hear you, Tyler. You're back. You're back.
Oh, you do hear me. Great.
Yes,
Thank
you are back.
Excellent.
I'll give it all. Let me just finish this 12-hour time frame, and then I'll give it back over to you. I'll do it real quick. I'm
Okay.
always careful with these one-off price flips because this could have easily been a 7, 8, making this a 9 and 13 on the same candle, but we did go significantly lower. This move was big. The 12-hour chart is only on a 1, so this needs to hold. Also remember, the current day just started. For all I know, I can wake up tomorrow and we're back at 7,600. This news has to be absorbed. And we'll talk about the news after. All right, let me stop screen share. Go ahead and do yours, Tyler, and hopefully we still have your mic.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
very good. Tone just made a lot of very important points. There's about 4 things I want to talk about. First of all, anybody that listens to our Twitter channel knows that this morning I wimped out and I turned my back on my own system. I said, it now seems, I did this about 10 hours ago. It now seems with less than 11 hours to go that phase 3 will not hold. This means that phase 2 is our next target at approximately 4,000. But I did add this. I said, this call is premature and could be wrong, but the weight of the evidence appears overwhelming. Now, as you know, I've been saying for many, many weeks that the surprising thing about hyperwave lines is that they are extremely resilient. But this one surprised the heck out of me. And let me tell you what the implications are of this. Number one, you're looking at a chart of hyperwave on Bitcoin with both the 2 and the 3 phase line, the best I've been able to draw them. This is the phase 3 running right through this candle that occurred on February the 4th, and now running right through this candle, which just ended a matter of minutes ago. What this does is we now have started a new candle, and the price will be about $135 higher than the 8,096. So we are actually going to have to close higher a week from today by a little bit, a couple hundred points. That's way too close because of everything Tone just said. We are walking a tightrope, and there is a vast drop below us if we can't continue moving up along this phase 3 line. I agree with what Tone just said about the excuse being given for this bounce. There is always an excuse, and it's usually news related. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But we need very soon, meaning the rest of tonight and into tomorrow, to establish a beachhead well above this line at 8,000, let's call it 8,170 for now. I'll give you a more precise reading on that. I'd like to get 300, 400, 500 points above it quickly. And I think that might establish a short-term bottom. Remember what happened here a month ago, a month and a half ago. That break and a close above it with the hammer or the dragonfly doji started a 5-week bounce. And we were all hoping that we would clear this 12,000, definitely 11,800, but 12,000, 12,500, somewhere in there on this bounce. And we did not do it. So now we have another touch point, and we will talk tomorrow about what the implications are in terms of dropping down to a phase 2, because we're getting some confusion by followers about exactly what that means. Let me summarize hyperwave from what I am seeing now. I have said I believe we are in a phase 3. I believe we are going to go all the way back up above 19,891. I believe that we are still in a downtrend from December the 16th at 19,891 on this particular exchange, which is Bitfinex, and 19,666 on Bitstamp. So we are in a downtrend. Yes, we are walking up an uptrend of the phase 3 line, but that is not the most important element right now. The most important element is being below the downtrend from the top, and we must get above that. We must clear 10,100, 11,100, the old high at 11,870. And we have to clear the various Fibonacci lines we've talked about before. But I think anybody that is rooting for Bitcoin, this has been a very important day. And with that, I will turn it back over to Tone.
So I have a question, actually. Given a lot of people have been correlating the bounce with the news in the G20, as we mentioned before. You, Tyler, and I have spoken about how news is often simply just noise for technical analysts, and especially in Bitcoin. As we do know, since we do work with traditional markets as well, economic policies such as Fed announcements or the G20 can be more important. But Tone, given the timing of this bounce today, do you think that it was important for Bitcoin today?
So I was actually going to ask Tyler something similar in that regard, because I think we're about to talk about the news. So this is where me and Tyler are actually about to disagree a little bit. Okay. So I think Tyler is actually putting more emphasis that this entire bounce was related to technicals and trading, and the news was less relevant. I, however, think that this news is what actually caused the bounce. And that led to irrational exuberance on this piece of news that led to a bunch of short coverings, crushing a bunch of traders. And we're about to talk about news in general. Like, I actually had also given up that the market was going to rebound today. And I think the entire rebound has to do with that news event. However, I think that this is not the type of news that I would expect to reverse a downtrend. I think there was enough technical support there, and traders were looking for any excuse to buy this bounce. And they got it in a form of a G20 news event. And they were able to capitalize on that, and a lot of shorts got crushed. I do not yet believe that this news is going to lead to anything significant. And I think the best it can do is go back up to maybe 95 or like 10,000, that area of the downtrend. And the most likely it will do is just give a couple of days bounce into the death cross. That's my current view of it. It just, like, the overall environment is still bearish. All they said was they're not ready to regulate Bitcoin globally, which is what they should have said. So I'll throw it back to Tyler on this one, and then we'll talk about news events and how they affect trading.
Yeah, I can't argue with any of the points that Tone just made. First of all, what the G20 basically did is they punted, but they did it in such a timely fashion that it had to coincide with a very important needed bounce in Bitcoin. Believe me, they did not do that on purpose. they fell into it. And my point here about the G20 or any major regulatory body is that the longer they wait to get involved with Bitcoin and to separate out the cryptocurrencies from Bitcoin, the better it is going to be for Bitcoin and the more difficult it is going to be for them to do anything about it. Bitcoin has been, in my opinion, under the influence of all the confusion brought on by the cryptocurrencies, not only regulatorily, but having to do with exchanges and who is mining what. And Bitcoin has been the poor sister of this discussion, which has lasted really since last August. And I think the tremendous run we took from 7,000 up to 20,000 was a sigh of relief. And that sigh of relief was for all the people that really understand and believe in Bitcoin. Unfortunately, they took it way too far. It should never have gotten up to 20,000. We should have ended 2017 at something like $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. All we've done now is we have given that back, and we're now in an area where people can really make decisions about the valuation of this thing called Bitcoin. And I think I would disagree slightly with Tone about where this might go. Meaning, I think this time we are going to be able to cut through those 7 layers running between 10,100 and 12,800 much more easily than we did. And I'm saying that not because Hyperwave appears to have exerted some influence, because nobody knows what Hyperwave is. There's very few people that have been exposed to it. And the line that you see, the Hyperwave line at 8,096, just a tiny fraction of any investors have been exposed to it all. The more important technical points are the ones Tone is making with the sequential system and the surprise of the bounce off of 7,500 that came, not my line at 8,096. But that bounce off of 7,500 also did something, and I would refer again to Haijin Lee's analysis over the last 3 or 4 days, that we could very well be beginning a 3 of 3 in a higher level counting of Elliott wave right from this point, which happens to be the same or very similar to what Tone has drawn on the chart you're looking at now in terms of this tremendous wedge. Bouncing off the bottom of this wedge happens to coincide with other technical things that are going on other than Hyperwave. And so even though I was ready to throw in the towel hours ago, now that we have the bounce off of 7,500, which Tone has been saying, if it was going to happen, it would have to happen there. 2, the bounce off of Hyperwave. 3, the possibility that Elliott wave has just completed with this drop down to the lows today, completed a very important 5 and is ready to go up in a 3 of 3. Okay, what we're talking about though is this little news item. The way I feel about all news items, regardless of how powerful they seem at the time, is I believe all of that news is already in the price. even before the G20 came out with this statement, I believe the knowledge that it was coming out was already in the market, because people, particularly when there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds involved in policy, can't keep quiet. It gets out. It gets out when a company is being taken over by another company, not because the two companies talk, but because the accountants, the lawyers, the people that make up all the documentation, it gets out.
Yeah, no, Tyler, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
But in Bitcoin, it's a little different because no one knows what the hell is going on. Everyone thinks they know what's going on, but nobody actually does. So no one in Bitcoin is A, connected enough, and B, has any clue on what it means. Because I can tell you guys, G20 saying this, what the same article could have came out, and the price could have dropped $1,000 instead of going up $1,000, and the same article would have been blamed for the move, because some people would have said, oh, you see, Wall Street is now not going to get in because there's no global regulatory clarity. So this news could have been interpreted as this is bad for the market, because why would a professional investor get in if there's no regulatory clarity? So there's absolutely, like, you don't know which way the thing is going to go. Now, most likely is it might be a couple of smart traders that saw an over leveraged short position across the board and knew they can take advantage. It also could be not very smart traders that went all in at a small price. But I would say on a move like this, on this type of news, this is not the kind of news that changes the global environment for a long time, because Bitcoin having global regulation, we're nowhere near there, right? It's still going to be based on individual countries. To me, the only relevant global news event this entire decade that had influence on the market was the Trump election. Nothing else. A significant news event that has the power to turn a market is very, very rare. They almost never happen. The reason why the Trump election, and I was calling for that all the way through, is because Trump, for at least 4 years, or most likely 8 years, unless, something happens, something catastrophic happens, he should be good for the private sector, as opposed to Hillary, who could have potentially been a disaster for the private sector. And America still, takes the whole world. So the only news event that I consider being a game changer this entire decade was the Trump election.
Yeah, great points. And I probably misstated what I meant in terms of this particular news event. My belief has always been, not always, but after the first 20 years of making so many mistakes, the last 20 years, hopefully I've learned something. And one of the things that I have learned about technical analysis is when a news item comes out, as Tone just said, depending where the technicals are when that news item comes out, the price will interpret it in 180 degrees opposite ways. If we had been up at 10,700, working our way through overhead resistance when this news item came out, it could have very easily fallen 1,000 points because of the confusion. It's just in this particular case, and it's just happenstance, that the news item came out at a point where we were walking right up that very important wedge at the bottom, and the hyperwave line was sitting right there. And apparently now we know that one interpretation of Elliott was saying that we were at a potential bottom. In other words, we have just fallen from 10,000 all the way down to 7,200. So on many measures like MACD and oscillators and RSI, some of the time frames were deeply oversold. And so a coiled spring doesn't need much to go in the opposite direction. And I think all that's what the G20 was. It was just a piece of news. And when a couple of people ran for the door, 10 people followed them, the price started going up, and then everybody crammed into a small space.
So Tone, given that you guys do have a bit of a different opinion on how the G20 news is affecting things, I have a question for you. Obviously, G20 hasn't started yet. And a lot of the people that are attending the G20, though, are extraordinarily anti-Bitcoin. Mark Carney, although, IMF Lagarde. So the question is, maybe the news is coming out today, that's for sure, that they're not going to be talking about crypto. However, when they all go back after the summit, what then? What if everything goes negative?
Well, not only that, right? Just because that article came out, and like you said, the G20 hasn't even started yet, they can still talk about it. There could be another article when this thing is over saying the complete opposite. We've all seen that before. And this is something that big government officials love to do, especially the Fed. They want to test the waters. The Fed starts to throw in wording like they're going to raise interest rates or they're going to lower interest rates. And then they watch the market reaction. And if the market reacts in a very bad way to what they're suggesting, they then come out and say, no, we're not going to do it. We were just thinking about it. We were debating. Don't panic. We're just discussing it. But if the market accepts their lead-in, then they go to the meeting and they're like, yeah, let's do it. So just because this came out doesn't exactly mean that this is how it's going to stay. So that's kind of my view on this situation.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely see. But while you pulled up your chart very quickly, can you definitely talk to the RSI divergence? It looks really interesting.
So we saw that a couple of people were talking about the RSI divergence over in the chat. So let me go ahead and pull up screen share. And so it was specific about the daily RSI divergence and the 4-hour. So the daily one, I'm going to squash right now. There is absolutely no RSI divergence in the daily. I don't see it at all. So if someone is seeing RSI divergence on the daily, they have better eyes than me because it doesn't exist. Now, we would have had RSI divergence on the daily if the current daily low would have gone lower than this swing low. And also, guys, keep in mind, the RSI only factors in closing prices. It does not factor in the swings intra-candle. Therefore, the only way you would have had daily RSI divergence is if we had a lower close than the close back here on February 5th at the price of below $7,000. We did not even cross 7,000 intraday. So I have no idea where people are seeing daily RSI divergence. So that brings us to the 4-hour chart. Now, the 4-hour chart did have divergence. The thing is, the divergence is it's a lagging indicator. It's not a leading indicator. So if I look, I can probably go ahead and draw this trend line through here, kind of like that. And you can see that you actually had it twice. But that also means you would have traded the prior low, assuming it's an RSI divergence going back to the top, in which case you would have had to take the loss on this trade because you went ahead lower and then you made a slightly higher RSI. The thing is, your price has to first reverse. If you're going to tell me that you were able to catch the low off of the RSI divergence before it had turned, I would say that you were guessing and you just got lucky. So RSI divergence is not actually something you trade. It's something you use as confirmation in order to help you set proper stop losses and proper exits based on prior swing highs and lows. And I'm curious what Tyler's opinion is on that.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I agree exactly with that analysis. I think one thing that might be interesting, I have not looked at it yet, is bringing up the stop and reverse point analysis. I might do that in just a little bit, but before I do that, I thought it would be important for a lot of people that have asked Leah and I, okay, we understand the analysis, but how do you actually trade this? So I think this is an important enough day that what I'd like to do is, first of all, give all the disclaimers that need to be given. I have not once since we've started our vlogs said anything about, I recommend you buy this or sell this. And I'm not going to do that now. But what I am going to do is I'm going to say that because of this turnaround off of the phase 3 line, what I will be doing with my clients where I manage money is we came into today with a 25% weighting on our targets for Bitcoin. We're using GBTC because we're using retirement accounts. And based on that, I am still not ready to add anything to that 25%. I personally have a 0% weighting. I have for many months from the peak, simply because, as you've heard me say, we are in a downtrend in Bitcoin. And when you're in a downtrend, I don't like to hold an asset. So I just wanted to make it clear that because I'm pretty excited about what we have seen over the last couple of hours, it's in a lot of ways pretty spectacular. It could fade very quickly starting tomorrow, and we might be in the soup again. But I am not so confident in this bounce that I'm willing to put clients' money, additional money, into positions. We need to get up above the 12,000 level before I will add any more money to trades in any crypto, in GBTC or into Bitcoin. Now, the only thing that I might change on that is if this week we see a tremendous follow through in price of Bitcoin, and I will say taking it up to the bottom of the resistance area around 10,000. If we see that this week, that will be a very strong signal for me that what I said earlier in this program, that we're going to cut through the resistance fairly easily this time. And I will probably double up my positions prior to that. So if we get up to around 10,000, I think that might be a signal. We'll see how oversold things are and what the oscillators look like, and what the consensus is in general, and take a look at some of these other terrific trading programs like the sequential, see if we can't be building something, see what is happening with Elliott Wave. But there's a strong possibility that we would double up from a 25% weighting of our target to a 50% weighting, and the other 50 would go in right on the other side of 12,500 to 13,000.
Tyler?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Sure. Again, just specifically as per today. So we fell down to 7,300. We ran back up 1,000, and we're now above the phase 3 line, which we were very worried about, right? So is it possible, can you bring up the chart and just very specifically show us what that means regarding hyperwave, that we stayed above the phase 3 line?
Sure.
Okay.
And after that, I'm actually going to slightly disagree with Tyler on my view of what will happen if we do go to 10,000.
Good.
So maybe, you know what, maybe let me do that real quick.
Yeah, why don't you do that first?
Okay, so here's I'm actually going to take this arrow, I'm going to move it over. So assuming we do go up, now I think that there could be some trouble when the price gets into the death cross. And earlier today, I talked about the significance of that. Now, I'm not sure how significant the 50 over 200 versus 200 death cross is in Bitcoin, because it's only happened like once before. So
Right.
we don't exactly have, a long history here of these assets. And most of the altcoins, their 200-day moving average has like just appeared. All right. Or most of them don't even have it yet. So, however, if we can break through that piece of resistance and we do end up going to 10,000, we're going to hit the upper range of this potentially massive symmetric triangle, in which case I would be pretty hesitant in assuming that we're going to break above it, because trend line trading, the fourth hit of a trend line is where that trend line is most potent. Some people draw trend lines with 2 points, some people draw trend lines with 3 points. But either way, I find that the fourth point of a trend line is where it has the biggest chance at being resistance or the best chance of being support. So if we do run into 10,000 plus the round number of 10,000 itself, after this move, I would expect it to once again pull back a little bit. Not to mention that by then, the 50-day would probably flatten out. And I would actually expect it to go into the point of the triangle. Now, granted, most symmetric triangles break with 20% of time to go to the point. But somehow, I think that if we do make it to 10,000, we will break back above the 50-day moving average, and either way, very likely to back test that 50-day moving average. So we may actually have a point where the price pulls back into this $9,000 area in the middle of April, so almost a month from today, and everything will get bunched up. Like, this will be massive. It'll be both moving averages plus the point of this triangle. And then at first sign of breakout out of this, even if it's below 10,000, even if it's like at 9,300, if it's getting some volume and momentum out of this massive triangle, then I can see some major buying coming in. But other than that, I pretty much agree with you. I want to see the $12,000 broken. My only exception is breaking out of this triangle at any point, whether it's 9, 9.5, 10, or whatever. But other than that, I would also look for 12,000. And now we can go over to Tyler for hyperwave stuff.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. What we're going to do, first of all, I'm going to agree with Tone in terms of what's going to happen as we get close to the apex of this triangle. It's at what point it's going to break out. And that's why I think it's very important that if we are lucky enough to get up into that range, anywhere over 9,000 to 10,000, we're going to have to use much more precise technical systems to time the trade. Hyperwave's a little bit like a brain surgeon wearing boxing gloves. It's can be fabulously informative in a macro sense, but not timing trades. So I would agree with everything that Tone just said. What I want to do with this is I want to just pull up. I have not done this, and I might be surprised at what we see. The stop and reverse points here. On a weekly basis, the Wells Wilder stop and reverse. From the top, we've got all these weekly points that are buy points if we can ever get up to them. And then what I want to do is I want to come down to short time frames. And you see that we are right now on the 1 hour. We have broken up through the stop and reverse point, giving us a buy. The first one we have had for about a day. Let's take a look at the 2 hour. It has done the same thing. And the 4 hour is not yet there, but it's approaching it pretty quickly. What we need to see happen, I think, is we need to see this acceleration through these stop and reverse points that run up to about 9,000, depending on the time sequence for the 12-hour chart. On the 1-day chart, it's around 9,500. And on the 3-day chart, right around 10,000. Again, that's why this 10,000 is going to be such a massive area. The weekly is way up around 14,000. But by the time we get there, if we can get up that high, it will have been coming down fairly rapidly, probably around the 12.5 area that Tone and I have been talking about. That seems to be a very important conclusion to getting through all of the nonsense between 10,000 and 12.5, and the stop and reverse looks about the same. Leah, on your question, what does this really tell us? It does not, unfortunately, tell us very much about hyperwave, other than we did not break down below the phase 3 line. That's all it tells us at this point. It doesn't tell us what we're going to do this week or next week or the week after. I have pointed out that the phase 3 hyperwave line climbs to the 10,000 area by the end of May. So between the middle of April, where the apex of the triangle takes place, and the end of May, where the hyperwave phase 3 line is going to be around 10,160, something big is going to happen. We're either going to break out to the upside of this big triangle, or we're going to break down below phase 3 and below the lower line on the triangle. And until one of those two things happen, everybody should be very cautious.
Tyler, just fielding a question from the live chat. Still a tiny bit of confusion around the different phases. And specifically, the question was, is phase 6 above phase 3 support? Can you just, in the chart that you just had up, define if, let's say we, this next week becomes rocky, or what your trend lines are saying about the trajectory of the various waves and what we can expect?
Sure. If you recall, this is what the hyperwave looks like in a schematic. And the question has been, are we in a phase 2? Are we in a phase 3, which is what I believe? Or have we already gone up to the top of a phase 4 at 19,666, all the way down to a phase 5, up in a phase 6, and we were actually working on a phase 7. And that makes it seem as if we don't have very much precision, but that's only because you're looking at this chart, which is a compilation of now almost 400 different hyperwaves. On the specific one we are talking about, it's important to understand that this phase 3 line now has 11 touches on it. And the angle looks more like a phase 2 to me, and is exactly where GBTC is on a phase 2 line. That got me thinking that even though this seemed like a huge blow off, 3, 4, 5 down, 6, or what some people are asking, maybe this is a 5 down and we're going into a 6, and then we will go all the way down and do a 7. That is a possibility. But then how do you explain this line? You can't explain away these two important attempts to break the line and failing if this is actually a 5, 6, and a 7. I think the right interpretation is this is a phase 3. And if it doesn't hold, we will fall back to a phase 2, which will hold very probably until we get above 19,000. I believe what this is simply an acceleration that did not make it into a phase 4, and a phase 4 is still to come. That's my best interpretation.
Hey, Tyler, I got a question on the stop and reverse points because I am not familiar with that system.
Yeah.
But can you explain what happened the second week of November? Because it was a bullish week, but it broke the stop and reverse point, made it a short.
Yeah.
And then it went back as being bullish. And I don't understand that because that was a good week. Why is it telling you to sell at the top of that week?
Well,
Or at the bottom, or at the bottom of that week, I guess.
Exactly. It was at the bottom where you broke.
Okay.
Take a look at what's amazing about this system. It's so simple, but it's intriguingly interesting. What happens is the stop and reverse, it's actually called a parabolic stop and reverse, which simply means the longer a trend stays in place, the quicker the angle moves up on these stops. So what happened on this particular week is we opened very low, and it was low enough on the opening to actually hit the next SAR point, which had already been posted, and it was taken out early in that week. But it moved up so high that it also ended up at the end of the week taking out the stop at the top, and that gave you another buy signal.
So basically, if you use the system to trade, you would not have a trade that week. You would be out on the first tick of the week, and then you would wait to see how the week ends, and then you would be back in on the first tick of the following week.
That's exactly correct.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so what I wanted to add is, and this is kind of disappointing, mostly because I have to fly to Russia on Tuesday, and then I have 4 busy days in a row with 2 conference days and 2 trading seminar days. I, and yourself included, Tyler, we expected a full resolution of where we expect Bitcoin to go as of 8 p.m., as of an hour ago.
That's
and
right.
Right now, all we have is another week of complete confusion. So we need another week in order to come up with any kind of a statement about what we see for the future. Because I fully expected to know what the plan was going to be for next week. And now, based on this last 4 hours of trading, I am actually, I have even again, you're back to neutral for another week.
Yeah.
Because had we closed below 7,500, I would have been one of the biggest bears in all of technical analysis right now. But because of this bounce, it's not strong enough to give me any kind of bullish conviction. All I see now is the news caused a dead cat bounce until it proves to me that it's not.
I agree completely. You're exactly right. And unfortunately, that's, as you know, and have been telling people for a long time, that is what trading is all about. What we've just done is we've run through a minefield for the last 7 days, and we came out the other side. What's in front of us is another minefield. And until we can clarify by breaking out of that large wedge to the upside or the downside, anybody is flipping a coin. And flipping a coin is like hope, and that is not the way you want to invest.
Right. And here is one more point to that, right? Had this day, 2 days ago, had the candle of the 17th of March was not such a down day, if this candle was a reasonable day that kept us at current prices of 8,400, and had we gone up off of this news $1,000 up into the $9,000 plus area, then this would have been perfect textbook technical analysis, taking you from this reversal candle back up into this trend line, because then you would have already been in between the moving averages ahead of the depth cross. Because this thing took you even lower and made a lower low, it made the whole situation even more confusing with the weekly close and the beginning for the following week.
Yep. I agree completely.
All right, gentlemen. All right. Is there anything else that we want to look at? I'm not seeing anything from the live chat. If you guys have any other questions, I'm the one that's trying to field it tonight. But
I want to thank David for his tip. Thank you for the comment as well. Much appreciated.
Absolutely true. All right. Well, let's see how this week holds.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm good. We went just under an hour, which is perfect. Any final thoughts? I think I kind of said what I wanted to say. And also, if you look at the current candle, right? Again, the next day has just started. One final screen share. Look, here is the current candle. Like, this could all be about nothing. We can end tomorrow back below 8,000. I mean, again, I don't see this as the kind of news that warrants a $1,500 jump in price. And the environment right now is not all that bullish. We're back to a bearish trend. So I could be proven wrong here. Hey, I'm still holding on to all my Bitcoin. I would love to be wrong and have Bitcoin be at $25,000 by end of month. I'll be the happiest person in the world. But I would be very, very careful on this. And if you were already short, you take the loss and you just have to live with it. And then you wait for the next opportunity. And if this is going to go up, I think unless it starts to go up very slowly, we're not going to have a 9 at the depth cross, though it's possible. But I would love to see a 9 at a resistance point for the timing of the bearish trend. Like right now, I would still be trying to time my bearish trades versus buying the breakouts, because the only breakouts that are going to be on this chart over the next 2 months are either the breakout above the triangle or the breakout above 12,000. And I'm a big fan of buying breakouts. Meanwhile, there were multiple points of selling the breakdowns, with more attempts to sell the breakdown very, very close in that $7,500 vicinity.
Tyler, I do have a question for you. And Tony, I actually have one coming in through for you as well. And I do think this is quite prescient for you, Tyler, given GBTC. So the question is actually 2 questions in one, which is Amazon is in a hyperwave. What happens if there's a stock split, and how does that affect the wave? Moving on to the second is, if you had bought puts before that, what happens to your quantity and strike price?
None of it should be affected, but I can let Tyler go ahead and answer him.
Yes.
No, that's exactly right. Don't ever worry about technical analysis and stock splits. Stock splits have absolutely no effect on price or value or worth. And that is all taken into account in the charts themselves. And a good example is GBTC. GBTC earlier this year had a 90-for-1 stock split. And there's 3 or 4 days of confusion with people, because all of a sudden, instead of looking at something that was trading at $2,000 a share, it's trading at $20 a share. But that does not affect hyperwave or angles or movement of price or the sequential system or Elliott wave or anything else.
Yeah, and same thing for options. Like if there was a 2-for-1 stock split, then either you'll have twice as many shares in that option or half as many shares in that option, depending which direction the split was, whether it was a reverse split or a standard split. And the only reason why stock splits happen is to increase trading liquidity in that stock. It's the only reason why they happen in either direction. If a stock becomes a penny stock and the company wants to increase liquidity, they would do a reverse split. If the stock gets too high of a price and they want to bring in more of a mom and pop trader as opposed to the high-end professional, they will split that stock to increase liquidity.
Tone, question from the audience. Are you seeing the 7-day, 30-day, 50-day, and now 200-day meeting all together? Every time this has occurred, it has been a bullish run of Bitcoin going back to the every beginning. Can you comment?
I highly doubt that because I'm sure this happened in late 2014 and it was not all that bullish. It's a bullish thing when the slower moving averages, the faster moving averages with a smaller time frame are going above the slower moving averages with higher time frame. When it's the opposite, it has the opposite effect. So just because they're bunching up, it doesn't necessarily mean bullish. It really means which ones are crossing which.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I apologize to those listeners of our vlog, Leah and my vlog. We introduced a new trading system called Consensio, which is based on doing what Tone just described, which is understanding the movement of price relative to various short, intermediate, and long-term moving averages. And we will this week early have part 2 of that, and then we will begin going into some in-depth of how to use that information. It's just I've been sort of glued to the set here with all the hyperwave stuff for the last couple of days.
All right, back to you, Leah.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions, guys, unless you want to throw them in really quickly. Then I think that's it for tonight.
No, I think it's good. I think we can call it a day. Hey, guys, thank you so much for tuning in on this very special edition of Trading Bitcoin with Leah and Tyler. Check them out on their YouTube channel. It's called Hyperwave. Very good channel. Check that out. And Leah and I will see you guys bright and early on the East Coast and West Coast of the US tomorrow morning.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.